People deal with grief in many ways. There are the 5 stages of grief, but what makes us unique is how we physically express those stages. After talking to the police for what felt like hours, one poor officer got my brother's expression of grief firsthand. I could still hear him yelling hysterically at the young cop. She even drew her hand back as if she were reaching for her gun to get him to calm down. Anger, spite, and alcohol. Without any alcohol, my brother was left with venomous anger and spite in his veins. In fact, he was reaching toxic levels. He was one freak out short of getting placed in handcuffs. The detective interviewing me, Detective Gottfried, seemed gracious for my cordial attitude. The answers to his questions swirled around my tongue, but the words couldn't articulate the situation accurately. I told the story repeatedly like a skipping record. I nodded politely at his responses and bit my lip when his voice delved into accusatory waters. My sentences were fragmented, so putting up a fight was like swimming upstream in rapids. Could they hear the sound of my thumping heart? Could they sense the tread I was in? The real question was if it mattered. Once Dexter pulled that feather from Emma's mutilated body, we both knew that we were beyond police protection. Denial. A stage I couldn't afford to linger in. Paramedics ignored the cops as they continued to wave flashlights back and forth in front of my eyes. Their icy hands probed and prodded at my neck. After walking in a straight line and doing some grueling neurological tests, they concluded I wasn't concussed, but they worried that I was in shock. I huddled myself deeper into the blanket they provided me as my body quaked on the tail of the ambulance. Whether it was from shock or from the cold, I couldn't tell. Snow started to dance down from the night sky and whipped wildly in the razor-sharp wind that licked our faces. I released a shaky breath when I heard the sound of a woman's bitter voice cut through the night.
That's my daughter, you lunatic!
I craned my neck to see past the crime scene investigators, cops, and vehicles. Just on the other side of where the police had taped off was a woman bundled in a dark purple winter coat and 3 scarves. She was snapping viciously at the officer that was refusing to let her through. "Damn it, Mom," I breathed, pinching my brows together. I must have lost track of time. There had to have been about 30 or so missed calls from her on my phone right now. We were supposed to be back at her place about 2 hours ago. A fuming Dexter marched up to where I was sitting and leaned himself against the ambulance.
"Mom will be taking us home,"
he informed me, crossing his arms.
"They found blood on my tires and are confiscating old Rusty as evidence."
I sat up tentatively. "Can they do that?" He shrugged.
"What does it matter? We didn't do anything wrong. It's not like they'll find out all along that we were some sort of Bonnie and Clyde serial-killing hooligans or something."
"I sure hope not," I muttered expressionlessly. Bonnie and Clyde were lovers. I tried to joke, but the words simply drifted off my lips and into the air like a flame in the wind. I felt completely divorced from my own emotions. I wished I could feel anything other than the muted dread in the back of my mind. It was as if my world was underwater and I was hopelessly floating through its current.
"I don't think I'd be good to drive anyway,"
he admitted, rubbing the back of his neck uncomfortably.
"Jesus Christ, Penny. Just... Jesus Christ."
The last part of his sentence was barely a whisper as he laid a hand over his face. I know. I reassured him, looking down at my high heels. My feet had long since lost most feeling, yet they still somehow hurt like hell. I wonder how long it took for Emma to lose circulation. I felt my body jerk forward in discomfort. The image of her hit me like a mosquito flying into my ear.
"Are you okay?"
Dexter said, standing up straight. I rubbed my temple frustratedly. "No, I'm not," I uttered, clenching my eyes shut. I wasn't in any severe physical pain, but the memory of her face, her body, her tears. It was enough to momentarily break the numbing spell I felt inside. It was impossible for my body to not respond to that image. It's a dream. This is a dream, a horrible nightmare. It's not real. It's not real. It's not real. It's not real. Denial was rearing its ugly head for me at last. It felt safe. It felt like a life preserver for my brain, causing me to break my floating pattern and actually try and reach for my safe space again. But the water still surrounded me. Reality still surrounded me. I released the blanket, allowing it to fall onto my shoulders. I gripped the bottom of the ambulance with all of my might, hoping to center myself. However, I wanted nothing more than to disappear into the bitter wind and fly above the treetops. I felt the ambulance shift slightly as Dexter sat next to me. It was enough to stir me awake. I opened my eyes to blankly stare in his general direction. He placed his hands between his knees and shook his head.
I want that to be right too.
He confessed with a distant edge in his voice.
I want it to be true so badly. Especially since we're just talking about her and after Dad.
Dad. I was so devastated I forgot we were coming back from our father's funeral of all people. I fell into a deadly silence, desiring to return to a state of numbness. At least he can't die again. I shuddered, sparing a few passing looks at Dexter. He'd collapse from a heart attack all over again.
Yeah. Shit, Penny.
He sighed, crossing his arms. I didn't like the look of him. Small, scared, and insecure. He was not at all like the brave, cocky, towering man I saw just hours ago.
That was the first time I saw a body, you know.
What?
Think about it. When have you ever seen me go to a wake? Every other funeral, I've made it to a point to skip looking at the corpse.
He wiped the side of his face with his shoulder.
I was never sure if I could handle it. I should have looked, though. Before seeing Dad. Might have given me practice. But you always think your parents are immortal.
They always look like they're sleeping. I tried to comfort him.
No. Have you ever seen Dad sleep?
He cocked a brow at me.
I knew he was dead, or his mouth would have been slumped to one side, and he'd have one hand down his pants. And I'm saying all of this to you because I know Mom won't let me talk about him like this. I mean, what is her deal with negativity? She can't handle one terrible thing happening to her ever.
Okay, big brother, I assured him, patting his arm. I couldn't really remember what Dad looked like before the mortician got her hands on him. I could vaguely see his wispy hair, his broad smile, his porky hands, and the seams of his plaid button-down sweater. Spots of gray would pulse around his image, though, obscuring me from seeing him clearly. His face sagged and tightened as if it was going from ancient to childlike. We had some pictures at home, sure, but I wanted to capture him in my mind's eye and hold him there, warts and all. A pang ran through my body. Pictures. We had pictures of Emma all over the place, including our phones. Just friends hanging out. I would have to go through them, but could I look at Emma the same way? I feared, should I see Emma's smiling face, all I'd imagine is her torso being sliced open. That image will forever be embedded in my brain.
I have to call Donna once we get back to Mom's. She was expecting me to call her a while ago.
He continued after silently finishing his own train of thought.
I'm sure she'll be thrilled to know that I have to grieve the loss of an ex again.
If she loves you, she'll think nothing of it, I stated robotically. I didn't like Donna. She was a soft tulip of a woman that looked for any reason to be offended. Her ego was as fragile as her pale skin. Yet she just felt free to say whatever she liked about those around her. She told my mother that her cooking was, how did she put it, as dry and as old as she was? Yeah, that sounded just about right. Donna might have been beautiful physically, but the ugliness of her personality muddied my image of her. The only one I've seen her treat with kindness was Dexter, but even those charitable moments ran thin. Much like Emma. My heart accelerated. And if she doesn't get off her broomstick...
Okay.
Dexter shrugged off my hand and stared at me accusingly.
Could we not talk about violence?
Right. I mumbled apologetically. The feather. The words scrolled across my brain like a banner. They're gonna find out.
Who?
Dexter asked. He blinked a few times as if the change of subject had given him whiplash.
And what about?
About...
Excuse me.
A voice called out roughly. I painfully turned my head to watch Detective Gothreed jog up to me again. He squinted at me with big brown eyes as the wind blew against his face.
I'm sorry to bother you again, but something just occurred to me. You said you went to school with this woman?
Yeah.
The same one where that McCarthy boy disappeared.
My stomach dropped. Sick fuck. A voice in my head jeered. A hand involuntarily shot to the back of my neck. What could I say? Should I say yes, or maybe, or who?
Yeah, the very same.
My brother responded. I glanced at him. His features darkened and contorted with each syllable.
Just wanted to confirm.
The detective elaborated ominously, taking a few steps backwards before turning around and trotting back. My breath hitched to my throat. They know now, I hissed. I felt like I needed to stand and run deep into the forest, never to be seen again, but I knew I'd just crumple onto the ground on unsteady legs. Dexter, we're finished.
Calm down.
Dexter hushed. His eyes were wide with some kind of anxiety that only a child could replicate in the dark of their bedroom.
We're going to figure this out. In the meantime, I decided to give them the feather. I figured, hey, it could have been just a goose feather or something, and since they...
Dexter, you were the one that said we were in trouble! I growled back angrily. Now you're saying we might be overreacting? Dex, at least explain to me how she could have wandered into the road all by herself on her own steam with those kinds of mutilations. How? She should have, I don't know, passed out or something. And for that matter, where the hell did she come from? Dexter continued to stare with cold green eyes. There was a myriad of thoughts running across his mind, I was sure, but none he wanted to say. He didn't have to. As I stared back, we had an almost telepathic battle. The mutters and busy footsteps of the commotion surrounding us became muffled by the cacophony of thoughts being passed.
There.
A voice chirped, breaking the curse. My brother and I both turned to see our mother being escorted by a tall woman in a uniform.
Let's go home, my loves.
Hi, Mom.
The car ride felt twice as long as it should have. Mom had practically turned the car into a sauna, blasting hot air on high, yet the air was thicker than usual for another reason entirely. For the first 10 minutes, none of us made a peep. Mom white-knuckled the wheel as she carefully navigated the slippery, sloping, mountainous woods. Night was always darker in the mountains thanks to the looming mounds of land that caused the shadows to cascade down in a bowl of darkness. The snow thrusted itself against the windshield like tiny hands pounding to be let in.
How are you holding up, Ma?
Dexter asked from the back seat, breaking the rhythmic sound of the windshield wipers moving back and forth.
I'm fine, dear.
She breathed, brushing his question to the side. Her green eyes fell to the picture of Dad that dangled from the rearview mirror. The car fell back into a viscous silence. We're happy you're okay, I continued after a few moments of quiet.
Don't worry, honey. It's you two I'm worried about.
A twinge of warning laced her voice. Dexter and I exchanged knowing glances before his eyes darkened. Realization crept over me, and I shook my head at him from the front seat.
So you're okay after Dad's funeral?
He blurted, clearly repressing a smirk. After the words left his tongue, a small tear pricked at his own eye, once he let the meaning of those words follow. I clenched my jaw and took a wary look at Mom. Her hands clenched the wheel tighter, Her cheeks pinched together into a tight, mechanical smile.
Oh, Dexy.
She started lovingly.
Daniel's just waiting for me in heaven. Dead is just another word for gone. You remember what he always said.
Heaven's like a bus stop where our loved ones wait to pick us up.
He quoted, rolling his eyes.
That's right.
She affirmed. Her voice had a touch of excitement. Her hands relaxed a little. Her eyes darted back and forth from the windshield to the rearview mirror with the question, "Can't we talk about anything other than my husband?" firmly in her mind.
But poor Emma. I don't know how you two are holding up after seeing something so horrific happen to your friend. Her mother must be devastated. All alone up there on the ridge, without a daughter. Such a crime. Do the police know what happened?
No, I answered before my brother could open his mouth. At least I don't think so.
Oh dear.
My mother mumbled, placing a hand to her cheek. She glanced in the rearview mirror.
I hope she wasn't hit by a car.
Mom! I snapped.
What?
She asked, shrugging.
I was just trying to be polite. I wouldn't suggest my son did it. He's a very careful driver.
You were thinking it.
Dexter grumbled, crossing his arms. Mom had a way of making the child in him show. The tension in this tight little space was starting to build. I contemplated tucking and rolling out the door, but that would mean facing the bitter cold. Oh hell, compared to the heat in this car, maybe that wouldn't be such a bad thing.
No, Dexy, I would never.
She mumbled apologetically. Dexter raised a brow, but something about her seemed sincere. There was no denying that she didn't mean the words that she said. But there was no denying that she probably felt bad about them too.
Emma was your girlfriend, after all, right?
Dexter stared out the window, his mind slowly drifting away as mine once had.
I don't want to romanticize that period of time, but she was very lovely when she wanted to be. She had her own flair, different and lovely.
He said dreamily.
You talk like a romance novel when you're feeling nostalgic. Has anyone ever told you that?
Mom chuckled. Dexter bit his lip.
Occasionally, I'm not like my sister with her fancy education. Dad would have been proud.
Yeah, he would.
I frowned, feeling like Dexter and Mom were butting heads in order to broaden the holes that were in each other's hearts. The car fell silent again as we pulled into the driveway, now dusted with snow.
Mom?
Dexter softly asked from the back seat.
Yes?
She replied, closing her eyes tiredly.
We need you right now.
He admitted, staring pleadingly at the back of her seat. After killing the engine, she shifted in her seat to get a better look at the both of us. Her artificial red hair swept over her face in wisps.
We really need you.
She considered him for a moment with sympathetic eyes. She looked between me and him as if waiting for the punchline. She finally smiled lovingly and patted his knee.
We need each other.
Dexter and I exchanged comforted looks. We quietly piled out of the car and headed for the front door. Dexter and I walked side by side as we entered the house. As I stopped by my bedroom, I realized Dexter wasn't walking past me. Instead, he was over by the living room. He slid over to the bookshelf nervously. I pretended, whether for my sake or for his, that I only imagined he slipped a yearbook under his arm. The one that had Toby McCarthy, the year he had disappeared.